Kingstream Entertainment. Ruslan.
Got to get into this brand new Logic Instagram post. My man went at the whole label and really went in. Now, why am I addressing this? Well, when I did this Jubilee interview, Queen Herbie did an amazing point where she said that only 2% of rappers on major labels ever recoup. What does recoup mean? Recoup means that if you're on a major label, you generate enough money off of your slither, usually about 20% at the most, to pay back the label. What does that mean? That means if the label gives you $1 million, you have to generate $5 million in sales to pay back the label before you start seeing any money on the back end. Why is this important? Well, because major labels keep artists in debt. We've talked about this extensively on the channel. I've talked about it with KB on the channel. It's a really nasty kind of toxic system that I don't see extended to a lot of other businesses. And most labels lose money on 98% of their artists simply because of how it's set up. And so there's a lot of tax write-offs. So Queen Herbie made the point that, listen, only 2% of artists ever recoup. And basically that debt is passed on from one album to the next album to the next album. And the artist forever stays in debt. Well, today, Logic posted something on Instagram, and it was a back and forth conversation with one of his friends. I wanted to pull this up, and I'm going to tie this into the Big Sean getting back his masters, or supposedly getting back his masters from Kanye. Logic posted this conversation. Yeah, just wondering if everything's okay because I haven't seen a penny from the album or the sessions. That's weird, bro. So this is his homie Kevin. And Logic publicly on Instagram says, Def Jam, can you please pay my friends and musicians that have made my album great? This is ridiculous at this point. I shouldn't be getting calls from close friends of mine in the middle of dinner with my wife about how you haven't paid them from the budget you've given me for this album. How does this work? A label gives you an album, album budget. They give you a personal advance, then they give you an album budget with recording and, production cost, right? And a lot of times, if you don't use all that up, you could even take some of that money out. And Logic is probably getting, I don't know, a couple million per album budget, right? He's a pretty top tier artist. So Logic is saying, you're not paying my boys. He said, my boy 6 ain't been paid all his money. Like, who produced the intro and hasn't been paid all his money? Kevin, Rat Pack, they haven't been paid their money. He even came out and said Lil Wayne wasn't paid for his verse. That's why I guess he had a remix from this record to come out with Lil Wayne. These are just the calls I've received. I don't even know who else is effing of my friendships you've effed up. This has to be the 6th call I've received. You are ruining personal relationships. This ain't Noah, my A&R. This ain't none of the core homies on the label that helped me make my albums great. This is the people deep in the company that I've never even met. Pay these people. What is wrong with you? I pay all my debts. This is not my debt to pay. These are friends, but they are hired musicians, and I demand you to stop effing up my personal relationships. What is wrong with you? I'm not trying to start a war with my label, but at this point, it is utterly unfair. I mean, to this day, besides in advance, I mean, let's catch this. I mean, till this day, besides in advance, I've never seen a single cent in the 8 years I've been signed to the label. But I don't care about the money. I just want my homies paid. What's going on here? Y'all make me want to retire. Y'all make me want to unretire and drop the last album I have under my contract just so I don't have to deal with y'all no more. Now, the part that really stood out to me is he says, I mean to this day, besides in advance, I have never seen a single cent in 8 years I've been signed to the label. Single cent in 8 years. 8 years. What is he talking about? Remember, I told you guys, labels give artists an advance. That advance is recoupable, but it's never really recouped. Why is it never really recouped? Because let's say Logic got $1 million to do his album. Let's say he got $500,000 to up front to put in his pocket for every album. And let's say he got another couple $100,000 to pay the musicians, another couple $100,000 for studio time, right? And then we're not talking marketing fees. We're not talking about music videos. We're not talking about, promotion, all that other stuff that goes into it. So let's just say someone like Logic will usually spend between 2 to 3 million on a record. This is my guess based on the numbers that Kanye was doing. Kanye was doing like 3 to 4 million. They came out with his contract. They said he spent $500,000 in Paris, right? $500,000 just in hotels in Paris. So a lot of these guys, they spend a lot of money on these records and they get in advance. What does that mean? So let's just say Logic spent $2 million on this record. I'm throwing out a number. He may have spent less, may have spent more. And it also sample clearances. That's another thing we don't factor in. Boom, $2 million. Well, let's just say Logic has a 20% royalty rate. That's a lot. But 20% royalty rate, He's only recouping from his 20%. So to pay back $2 million, Logic has to generate $10 million in album streams and sales. And when you're only making a third of a penny a stream, $10 million to generate off the actual album is very difficult, even for a Logic, right? Even for a Logic. Now, again, I'm throwing out these numbers. So what does that mean? That means that a lot of times these artists don't recoup, and that balance. So say he did $9 million. Let's just say he did $9 million. He's technically still in debt to the label. That budget is passed on. That debt is passed on to the next album. And how it works is, yeah, you're $1 million in debt, but we're going to give you another advance, and we're going to give you another budget, and you're not going to recoup on that album, and then that'll get passed down and passed down. And so now Logic is in a position where he's literally never even gotten a dime from the back end of his money. The Spotify checks that I get every month, the Apple Music checks that I get every month, the YouTube checks that I get every month. Logic's never seen a dime of the back end because he's only gotten money off the advances. This is really interesting because you would think a guy like Logic would be recouped, right? You'd think he would have recouped all the money spent on his album, but he hasn't. And now it's to the point where these labels aren't even paying the homies or the session musicians, the producers, for work rendered, hired hand. These are hired guns, right? This is crazy. This is crazy. So what does this have to do with the music industry as a whole? Again, 2% of artists pay back their advances. When Kanye came out with this tweet and he said, I'm giving all good music artists back the 50% share I have of their masters. Big Sean, who just put out an album, he said, thank you. This would help so much. What does he mean by this would help so much? Remember, Big Sean is arguably a bigger artist than Logic. I haven't looked at their sales, but it's possible that Big Sean has recouped. And if he got back 50% of his master, that would be 50% of the master royalties coming in. So let's just say Big Sean is doing, I don't know, 10 million streams a month, right? 10 million streams a month. That's about $40,000 generated a month. $40,000 a month, and half of that master, remember, half the master in Big Sean's contract is owned by Def Jam, the other half is owned by Kanye. So that could be potentially $20,000 in positive cash flow that Big Sean could be getting. And I'm using relatively conservative statements. It's possible that Big Sean could be doing 20, 30, 40, 50 million streams a month. I'm just saying 10 million streams a month. 10 million streams a month. Now I'm doing like 300,000 streams a month approximately, right? So if Big Sean is doing 10 million, he could be potentially generating $20,000 by getting that half of his master back. Why is this important? Because who owns the master recording controls that master revenue that comes in. And labels, remember, they do their own accounting. So they may finesse these numbers. Like I'm sure if Logic went and audited his label, he probably had recouped, but they threw in, extra couple $1,000s for studio time. They threw in an extra couple $1,000s in catering for the studio time. All of that stuff adds up, and you're not keeping track of that when you're in album mode. You're just creating. You're just going through the motions. The moral of the story is don't assume that because somebody is wildly successful that they're doing well financially. Because someone like Big Sean is saying, yo, this would help so much. Having that other 50% share of his master that Def Jam doesn't own from Kanye would actually really move the needle. I mean, $20,000, $30,000, I don't know how much that number is, but that would move the needle in anybody's life, right? So, and remember, when Russ came out and revealed how much he was making, Russ was making $100,000 a month. $100,000 a month from TuneCore, okay? Russ and Big Sean are probably at the same level, right? Stream-wise, I would assume so. Again, I haven't looked at any analytics. Russ is making $100,000 a month. So what's the point? The point is, if you can approach your business, your YouTube page, your T-shirt line like a business, if you could approach this thing like a business, you could have projections. You could understand what the consumer wants and how to get it to them. It's only a matter of time if you're good enough to build it out. And maybe you're not going to be Russ and Big Sean generating 6 figures a month off your passive income stream through Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes. But shoot, 10,000 a month, 15,000 a month, those projections become much more realistic when you own everything, right? When you own everything. And the question then goes back to, how much do you need? Those of you guys that are creatives, really think about this. How much do you need? What do you actually need to live the lifestyle that you want? What do you actually need? Right? For me, it's a little bit more. Why is it a little bit more? Because I live in Southern California. Southern California is very expensive. For me to buy a house near the water, we're talking about, 7-figure house. I'm working and I'm hustling because I gotta make a little more because I live in San Diego. But if you're living in Texas and you could have a paid for home for $300,000-$400,000 in Houston or in Dallas or in Austin, right? How much do you actually need to make off your art to maintain your mortgage, to maintain your expenses, or maybe to just buy a house outright, right? Those numbers become more realistic, right? And so $10,000 a month, like my man Bat said, $10,000 a month, that's a lot of money when you're 2021. It's not that much money when you develop 4 or 5 different revenue streams. When you got YouTube, when you got Spotify, Apple Music money, when you got merchandising, when you got, right? You add all that up, and it's not that much. It's really not that much. So, I mean, it is that much when you're just starting out, but it's not that because it's $2,500, right? 4 or 5 revenue streams at $2,500. It's not that crazy. And you also then got to account for taxes, by the way. So if you're netting $10,000 a month, which I've netted that much, if you're netting $10,000 a month, then you also got to deduct taxes, which at that tax rate, you're going to be paying about 25 to 30% in taxes. So $10,000 a month is really going to be like $7,500 a month. But again, how much do you need? Can you pay for a home, eat the food you want to eat, live in the neighborhood you want to live, travel when you want to travel? Can you do that off of $7,500 a month? For most of us, the answer is yes. Unless you live in New York, San Francisco, San Diego, Chicago, Seattle, the overwhelming majority of us is yes. The answer is yes. So those are my thoughts. I know I said a whole lot. What do you guys think, man? Don't get caught up in these numbers, guys. Don't get caught up in the vanity metrics. Don't play the comparison game. My reality is going to be different than Russ's or Big Sean's reality, right? They have massive platforms, but that doesn't mean that I can't make a comfortable living, not for the sake of just hoarding a bunch of cash, but for the sake of hitting some specific goals, but more importantly, having the money to use as a tool to help other people, to help plant more churches, to give back to God and his people, and to save and to establish a legacy. So those are my thoughts. I want to hear from you guys.
King's Dream Entertainment. Ruslan.